Welcome to A Deeper Look. I'm your host, Dana, and today we have a special guest, Mr. Damien. He's going to talk to us about collateral sanctions. And I don't know a whole lot about collateral sanctions. This is something that's very new to me. I know that there's a lot of our viewers that want to know more about collateral sanctions. And as far as I know, it's just restrictions. What restricts a family from getting resources after they've been incarcerated, like housing as an example, or jobs is another example. So we're going to have the experts tell us exactly what's going on. And I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Damon.
Well, thank you, Dana, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here and to be a part of these platforms where we can springboard awareness about issues that's near and dear to us. Before I go into collateral sanctions, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and like why I'm in this space. I'm Damien Calvert. I'm a returned citizen, and I've been home since March 28th, 2011, where I did 18 and a half years for second-degree murder. I was incarcerated September 17th, 1992. So it took me 18 and a half years to demonstrate my redemption. I remember when I was in the courtroom and the prosecutor was describing me as everything but a child of God. I remember I kept asking this question, like, how did I get here? We have a habit of looking at where we fail as opposed to where we slipped. So in asking that question, like, how did I get here? How was I in this space? How was I receiving this life sentence? And trying to figure out where those slips were, it literally sent me on the 18 and a half year journey to kind of like understand like how I ended up at that particular moment where I took life. So while incarcerated, after dealing with the bumps and bruises of coming into a prison and having to reconcile with a life sentence and being a young light-skinned brother in a prison full of men with all kind of different issues, my first 3 years was pretty hard. It was pretty tough. But there's some things that happened that kind of like brought clarity and focus to my journey. For example, in 1994, I was in Lucasville, where I did 13 months of solitary confinement, and it was in that moment, like, where I cried out to my Maker in every name I ever heard. You know, God, Jehovah, Jehovah Jireh, Elohim, El Shaddai.
Right.
And so in that, you know, I was just calling out in all those names, hoping that one of those names would stick.
Right, like, brother could use some help right about now.
Yeah, because I felt like I was in a hole within a hole, even beyond the gaze of the Creator. And so in that moment, you know, it could have been either or. A lot of men and women who doing time really go into a dark place in those moments, and it'd be hard for them to come back. It was in that moment that I was born in bits and parts, so to speak, meaning that when I cried out, you know, the arc of my journey, you know, changed. And I began reading more, and I just began hanging question marks on everything, because again, I was trying to figure out like, how did I end up here? And why that's important is because like getting into the space of advocacy, I like really had to take that journey backwards to understand, why did I carry guns? To understand, why was I selling dope? To understand, why was I running away at the age of 12? And in answering those questions, it was like, okay, when I was 12, you know, my mother was incarcerated. And I ended up in a children's home, group homes, or foster homes, and running away. Why was I so violent? Well, you know, growing up, light-skinned brother in my area, you know, I got beat up a lot.
Okay.
You know, and so bullied, and you know, those things weaponize you. And then, you know, being away from my mom, I didn't know who my dad was, being in the streets. You know, that's how I got involved in the drugs.
So you said your mom also went to prison. How old were you when your mom first went to prison?
I was 12.
12? Yeah, and it's a lot of that in our neighborhoods, where also both my dad and my stepfather both went to prison, and my stepfather died in federal prison. So throughout our neighborhood, it's just something that we see, like, growing up during these years. Like, it's, you know, some of us are second, third generation.
Absolutely.
Trying to figure out how do we stop this cycle of mass incarceration? And that's why I wanted you to come here and really talk to us, because nobody really knows the struggle except for those that's really been through it. So someone that's experienced it can give us firsthand knowledge about what their experience was and what it meant to them. So I'm really grateful that you're here today. So I wanted to talk to you about your advocacy, because that is something I'm passionate about. And also I'd like for the audience to know the role that you took into becoming an advocate, like being a champion for other people. You went from, like you said, being violent, being angry and upset, and then you had a humbling moment when you came to, when you were in jail, and you had to look at yourself and say, hey, this is not the person I want to be. I want to make a change. And how do I take the steps?
Absolutely.
You spoke about imagination. You had to imagine yourself a better man. Can you please talk to us a little bit about that?
Most definitely. And it's worth mentioning. The reason why I was talking about the early journey is because those experiences, those direct experiences we have in the prison, in the life, all of that, those experiences become part of our subject matter expertise. Mm-hmm. So we tell stories in the way we live our lives. That's a part of our story. And so to understand who we are and why we are, part of that journey is taking that walk backwards to understand how you came to be. So on these platforms, I do my due diligence in talking about the juvenile prisons I was in, like Buckeye Youth Center, Colgate Hills Boys School, not to mention the other group homes I was in, because from an outsider looking in, they'd be like, this man been locked up most of his life. Mm-hmm. Juvenile, then doing 18 and a half years as an adult. But the thing in that is that prison, doing time, reimagining yourself, all these things become part of my subject matter expertise, to defy the gravity of expectations and to break that cycle, right? Mm-hmm. You have to be able to harvest those lessons. So, for example, when I encounter a group of men and women who've been incarcerated, I ask them, how many of you survived prison? And they'll raise their hand. Mm-hmm. And I'll say, how many of you graduated? And then there's a question mark in their face.
Yeah, like what do you mean by graduated prison?
Exactly. And this is a very, very important question, because one, we all survive stuff. I survived being shot 3 times, a head, arm, and leg. Mm-hmm. But I didn't graduate that lesson because I went and got some kickback.
Oh, yeah.
But my incarceration, I graduated from that, which means that I learned those lessons. I've harvested those lessons. I apply those lessons in ways that add value and dignity to my life and to the people that I positively impact through those experiences. Okay. So to get to what you're talking about, advocacy. While incarcerated, I was involved in the resident-led organizations there, the JCs, which is the Junior Chamber of Commerce, the American Red Cross, where I was a certified instructor trainer in infant, child, adult CPR, first aid responder, and AED. And I also was a founding president of the NAACP Unit 34B branch in Grafton Correctional Institution.
Okay.
And from that, I was able to leverage those contacts that I had made with professionals and agencies in the community that would come in and assist my membership and the people part of the program. And I was able to leverage that into my own program that I wrote and envisioned and got approval to run, called Reentry Premier Program. Okay. And while doing all of that, this was hardcore organizing and advocacy in the prison.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so these programs helped you with your structure, not just, hey, I'm just out in here doing time, I don't know what life is going to look like when I get out. Exactly. They were based on rehabilitation, getting you together, getting your mind right, your mindset different. Like,
it was based on having a vision and a mission statement for my life. It was based on me finally arriving at a level of my evolution and maturity to answer the question, how I came to be, how did I end up here?
Okay.
That was a journey.
Mm-hmm.
So in that, it's worth mentioning, there was a book that I read by Viktor Frankl on logotherapy.
And say it one more time.
Viktor Frankl, logotherapy.
Logotherapy.
The book is called Man's Struggle for Meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And he, in summary, Viktor Frankl, and this is important for people to grab who's going through challenges. Viktor Frankl was a survivor of Auschwitz death camp.
Oh, okay.
He was a psychologist from the school of Sigmund Freud and them. But when he was captured and put in this death camp, as he endured the hardships and the struggle, he would watch his fellow human beings and ask the question, why did some give up the ghost and just die by the wayside? Mm-hmm. And what made those that struggled, that continued on, what gave them the gumption and to continue? What gave them that internal motivation? And what he found was that those who survived that were able to find some type of meaning in their struggle. Mm-hmm. And those who didn't find meaning were those who either didn't survive or was just tragically broken through the experience. Mm-hmm. Because what he had found is those who could not find no meaning in their struggle were like leaves in the wind, whipped about by the fate, and experience all the anxiety and neuroses that come from feeling disconnected.
They lack that inner strength and conviction to move forward.
They're not rooted in nothing.
Yeah.
And this was so important for me because, again, I was trying to answer the question, like, who am I? How did I arrive here? Like, what's this all for? And in that, there was a reclarification, like, there's meaning in this. There are lessons in this. And that is when I began to utilize these tools to reimagine myself. Yeah. Not just out of prison, but a part of a village. And not just a part of a village, of a community, but having some type of role in that community. Then the next question came out of that was, what kind of role? And in that, this was an important question for me because as in the Reentry Premier program, I'm seeing guys who I did time with, who've been home a year or two, cycling back into prison. And I keep asking them, why are you back? And I would have an attitude. I'm like, man, you done got this second or the third chance. Right. I'm fighting for my one chance and you coming back. Mm-hmm. But there was a theme in their responses. Man, they're not giving us jobs out there. Man, it's hard to find a job. Man, it's just hard. They won't accept you. One guy came back because of a living situation.
Yeah, housing.
The housing. Yeah, so I heard these themes. Mm-hmm. And so these themes begin to get me thinking critically, like, one, am I going to avoid that when I get my chance? Mm-hmm. How do I navigate that? And two, how can I not only prepare for the eventuality of my release, because I had a vision in my heart, I'm getting out. Yeah. But through these programs, who do I target resource-wise and professional-wise to come in to help us navigate this and give us the information that we can begin to operationalize in there to be better prepared coming home. And that's when I began to learn about Collateral Sanctions. That's when I began to learn, like, all these, when I was in Richland Correctional Institution, they had a very, very nice barbershop program. And all these guys put in these thousands of hours to get their barber's license. Mm-hmm. I used to let them experiment on my hair. And I'd go get facials and all of that. Mm-hmm. And they came home in early 2000 and wasn't allowed to get exercise that license because if you had a drug case, you weren't allowed to have a barber's license because they just stereotypically associated barbershops as fronts for drug activity.
Yeah, and that is kind of shocking. You're telling me something that I did not know. I did not even know you couldn't get your barber's license. Like, that was one of the things. And that's why I wanted you to come here today, because most people don't know exactly what does that mean. So if you could please tell the viewers, what's your definition of collateral sanctions?
So now, mind you, with the barbershops, that's not the case now. But as when I was incarcerated, I'm learning, like, what? They doing all these 1,000 hours and can't get a job? And what other jobs can we not get? So a collateral sanctions are legal barriers that are applied to men and women post-incarceration, meaning after you've done your time, you still have these barriers that bar you from housing, that bar you from employment opportunities, that bar you from certification, special certification that you can get for like running a 3/4 house or a halfway house or working with youth or the like. These are legal barriers that not only impact people post-incarceration, but also impact people with felonies. So you might have got a felony and it could have been a felony 2 or felony 3, and then you copped out to a 5th-degree felony or whatever. Nevertheless, it's a felony. And these felonies, even though they told you will not get no jail time, this is still on your record. And these felonies act as a barrier from you getting employment or again housing or other opportunities. Another thing, another legal barrier that collateral sanctions bars you from is from being able to bear a firearm. Now, there's been a strong argument like we do not want to give ex-felons guns. It's called weapons under disability, especially people who have violent cases. And I understand that. But when you've done your time, right, and you have a job and you pay taxes and you have a family and you're part of a business or maybe trying to start a business, and at a time when guns have become all the more accessible legally, and at a time where guns are just overall more accessible in the community, you can get a gun as quick as you can get a bag of weed.
Yeah.
Well, why, if a person has been demonstrated, been home 5 years, 10 years without incident, why would they not be allowed to defend their home?
Right, that's what I'm saying. So in my business, I'm seeing where maybe a young person, they wrote a bad check. Maybe they cashed their grandmother's check. They weren't supposed to. They were young, not really thinking. Well, it's a felony still, but now that they're older, say fast forward, it's 10 years later. Now they're an upstanding citizen. They have a business. They have a job. The family has forgiven this person. Now this person still can't have a firearm in his home. It's one thing to carry it on the street, but what about protecting your home? And when you think about that, like, because you committed a lower level felony, you should still be able to have, in my opinion, you should still be able to have the right to defend your home and your children if you've made amends, if you've served your time, you've done what you were supposed to do, you're still a stand-up citizen. Now here it is, like I said, fast forward a decade later, if someone was to break into your home, you can't even properly defend your home. So inside your home, that's the one place where you should have the utmost power to protect your family.
So collateral sanctions basically bars you from being able not only to participate fully civically in society, but to be a whole citizen. It's a basic right of an American, of a citizen, to be able to protect him or herself, him or her home. And so this has become a major topic of discussion because of the times that we're in. We're coming out of a pandemic.
Yeah.
We're in a time of great inflation. We're coming in a time where, there's rich and poor people. There's not even hardly a middle class.
Right. And crime is on the rise. We're seeing it with these break-ins, burglaries, and robberies. The numbers are way up.
And these things don't happen in vacuums. These things are interconnected and interrelated, right? And so there's a level of desperateness. And so in this desperateness, especially with the rise in fentanyl use and people in addictions, for those of us that live in areas, where they have high fentanyl consumption, for example, in their addiction, they will do some desperate things like come into your home.
Yes.
And so like to not be able to defend yourself is it's tragic, and it's a perfect conversation about us not being able to participate as whole citizens because of these collateral sanctions. When you study the history of collateral sanctions, it's actually a form of civic death.
Right, because you can't even function as an American. You can't function as a person. I'm hearing numbers like there's over 1,000 collateral sanctions just in Ohio where we live. Not even just our state. It's all over the country. These rules exist where a person is being barred from doing certain things that we take for granted we do every day.
Absolutely, and these collateral sanctions manifest not in just denial of opportunities. They can manifest in wage disparities. If you're fortunate enough because of the force of your conversation and your knowledge of your own subject matter expertise, and you can get into certain positions because you have that felony, they'll discriminate against you in the form of a wage disparity, and you won't be paid on parity, but other people are paid because they have the attitude like you should be happy to be here.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand the history of collateral sanctions going all the way back to medieval times. Where
say that one more time. You said going back to medieval times. Like
this is not a
new
new phenomenon that happened with the creation of the war on drugs and the cradle to the prison pipelines and mass incarceration as it is. No, collateral sanctions goes back to the medieval days, to where all the way back in old England, where a lot of our laws are based off of. If you were convicted of committing a crime of disturbing the king's peace or a crime against the realm, then you were stripped of your citizenship. You were outlawed. And that comes from the root word outlawry. It means to be outside of the law and the entitlements and protections of the realm, which during those times was tantamount to a civic death. Because there, when you're stripped of those rights and entitlements and protections, a normal citizen can kill you with impunity, especially if there's a vendetta and there's no legal redress for your family. And in those times, being cut off from your village was a literal death. And when we see what that looks like back in the 1800s and stuff during the Wild Wild West days, if somebody for whatever reason was declared an outlaw, there was a wanted poster put up of that person.
Right, we see
wanted
that
dead or alive.
But that was real life.
So so look at it, wanted dead or alive. So when this person was declared legally an outlaw for whatever the offenses were, they were wanted dead or alive, meaning an average citizen can see them like, oh, they want it, and there's a bounty for them, and could kill them with impunity and collect a bounty without any type of going through any type of
due
process or court or none of that. You could take them because they've been declared outlaw, stripped of all the entitlements and protections of society. And so civic death and outlawry that come from those medieval times, we see that still practiced today, because when you bar people from habitat coming home from prison, your first stabilization point into your community upon coming home is in housing, stable housing.
Right.
How can we get employment or concentrate on employment if I don't have a solid, stable habitat to woosah, to breathe, to write my goals and plans, to envision? How do I feel safe? Where's the security?
And this goes back to just the fundamentals of being a person, a human being, an American. It doesn't matter what your race is at this point. If you know, it doesn't matter what your religion is. It doesn't matter what you believe. These are just fundamental human rights that a person should have. You should be able to have a right to housing. You know, you should be able to have a safe space for you and your family to go, but to be turned away, turned on the street after you have served your time. Because the whole point of serving your time is you have been corrected. You went to a house of correction.
Absolutely.
You went to a place of rehabilitation. So after you have served your time, to just come back and find that you can't even get the fundamental rights of any human being is mind-blowing.
Absolutely. And so a lot of what we just discussed these were topics of discussions while I was incarcerated, because I'm seeing men who, some of them have cycled in and out 3 times.
And then they wonder
they're
why
recidivating.
the numbers for reoffenders is astronomical, and this is part of the problem. If you could find housing and resources and the right job to put money in your pocket, then you'll be less likely, in my belief, you'll be less likely to reoffend, because now you have something to feel good about. You are the head of your household. You can take care of your children. You're not thinking like, oh my God, how am I, you're not thinking out of desperation at this point.
So you just highlighted a central point in coming home, not just having equitable access to opportunities, housing, and employment, but to be able to earn a livable wage, because there's a whole other subset of challenges that serve as barriers to somebody coming home, for instance, who has restitution, court costs, arrears from child support, particularly if they did years, and you got a job where you making minimum wage, or in a time of inflation, and you're watching your money being took before you even hit your pocket.
Yeah.
And then you barely got anything to live on. And then you're placed in the horns of a dilemma, right? And so they'll just be like, well, why am I trading my labor and time for something I'm not even getting no return on? Let me just go back to what I know best.
Yeah.
These things, are very real in light of the collateral and the backdrop of the collateral sanctions. Then there's these other tier of issues, these subsets of issues that really just not only serve as challenges, but really enhance the trauma. These create traumas, additional traumas on a lot of the men and women who are just trying to transition and stabilize. So what I can say is, when I first came home, Senator Shirley Smith was working on, I believe, Senate Bill 338. I may be wrong on that, but there was a Senate bill to roll back some of those collateral sanctions, which one of the results was the opening up of the barber license.
Yeah, they're working on some, but for us to have numbers as high as 1,000, I think they're not moving fast enough. Because at the end of the day, these are our mothers, our fathers, our children that have gone to prison, served their time, and they're coming back home. So to have, gone through college, gone through school, like you said, spend all these hours bettering yourself, it should count for something. It definitely should put an opportunity in your path and not take an opportunity away. I
have personally seen some men and a couple of women who got taken advantage of, taking online courses, where they got in. For instance, some women went in to become an STNA, so they're going in to healthcare, homemade, to put all them hours in to get the Pell Grant, to take out the low interest student loans. Now they owe to do it, then to find out they're felonies.
Yeah.
Well, barred them from being able to work in the field, which they owe money for education, receive the education.
Yeah, that does seem kind of predatory, for an institution to
they do that, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I would say that's why it's so good to have programs like what you went through, and programs that you have been trying to create for people, so I would say, what is it that you would want the viewers to know about what you're putting together so that they won't be taken advantage of? Like, what are some key things that they should look out for when they're trying to, get back on their feet? They're trying to get an opportunity. They just want to get back on track. Like, what are some helpful things? Like you mentioned the NAACP and the different county programs. What is something that you think would be helpful so that a person can get employment, get their mind right, stay focused, and just have a chance out here? People just want to shop.
So, well, the first thing that I would say is to work on self. So regardless of whatever program that's out there, right, that we could identify that you can partake in, if you're not in a space where you could properly consume those resources and those tools and operationalize them, then you're going to be a failed statistic in this program. And why do I bring this up? Because we live in a reality of where programs get funding and they have to conform to those best practices, data-driven models. If you're negative data, they can't get paid. And so it's very important for those of us who've gone through these struggles to like be proactive in our own evolution. So
definitely, that was powerful.
Well,
yes,
you have to, and you know, for me, what helped me was while incarcerated, answering the question how I came to be, right? And answering that question, like what weaponized me, like what led me to the spaces, it gave me a lot of in-depth knowledge on the circumstances and the factors that forged me, that shaped me, that weaponized me, right? And in that process, I learned a lot about my own complexes. I learned a lot about my own fears. I learned a lot about self. And so
I like what you said earlier about you asked yourself, well, who am I? You know, I thought it's the simplest thing. It's only a few letters, but to me that has great meaning. When you look in the mirror and you just really look at yourself, who am I? You know, I think that's a good step forward. Like, who do you see yourself as moving forward?
That's your foundation. You have to answer the question, like, who am I and how did I come to be, before you can answer the question of who do you want to be. And this is where the reimagining takes place. But if you don't answer these other two questions, then you're not rooted in who you are. Until you answer those questions, then that's where you can reimagine. This is where imagination comes in. This is where you are able to take your lived experiences and these become your subject matter expertise, and you can build off of them. There you identify, like, okay, this is my passion, helping people.
Right.
But in helping people, like, what facet of help? You know, do I want to help people with an employment prep piece? Do I want to help people with my passion with housing, finding housing? Like, there's so many niches in this advocacy piece. But for you to answer it, you got to understand, like, who you are. And understand who you are, you got to understand how you came to be. And in some circles, that's kind of new talk for them. Because they say, well, here go these program tools. You utilize these tools. But the only way that you're going to get the highest utility out of these tools is if you know who you are coming into the space. So when we open up programs, for instance, Building Freedom Ohio, which I had the benefit of working for, which is led by Fred Ward. This is a network of returned citizens that's concentrated and focused on building power. But they understand that in order to build power, you have to identify how you're showing up in a space, to where even in the meetings, before the meetings start, the question is asked, how you showing up today?
Right.
You know, and the prerequisite to the work is to understand who you are and showing up in the space and understanding your self-interest. And this is so important in this type of work, because if we're talking about building power meaning to cause change in the community around laws and the things that adversely impact us, right? And before we can work collectively to be change agents to impact law, we have to work individually to find our own power and agency, which comes in the form of understanding your self-interest and who you are and why you're showing up in this space. These are fundamentals.
Right. This is like
foundation.
Yes, this is like heavy construction. You know, if you want change, you got to rebuild yourself from the ground up.
Absolutely.
From the, right from the root, from the foundation. You know,
Absolutely.
I hope you guys are paying attention to what this man is talking about right now. He's dropping gems.
So in that, you know, Building Freedom Ohio is very big. They have a strong political action network. They have a strong support amongst members. because only those of us who've been bitten by the snake can tell each other how it feels. So no matter how empathetic you are to the struggle, if you haven't lived it, bred it, bleed it, you know, there's a certain disconnect. So to have those who have been directly impacted leading the charge and leading the discussions, you know, you're able to feel more supported and understood in the space. And then those who've been through it could kind of like recognize where you're at in your continuum, in the continuum of your journey, and be able to reach you. So before I even get to talking about other agencies and things like that, we have to talk about, well, you have to deal with the root, because if you're going through all of this, you know, you're trying to find your job or find your place in society, but you haven't done the deep work in self, and you haven't challenged and overcame those things that brought you into those challenges in the first place.
Yeah, you're most likely going to be right back where you start,
because
back
life,
incarcerated.
You're going to, as soon as things get challenging, you fall back to that default behavior. So there's a premium of high accountability that's placed on individuals in this work. Because whether you like it or not, when you come home and you get your second chance, your third chance, your fourth chance, whether you like it or not, or own it or not, you become an ambassador. And you directly or indirectly represent those who are looking for those opportunities coming behind you. And if you get out and recidivate and do something dumb, the door's closed. And that's something I had to learn in working for community relations as the outreach supervisor, where for 6 years I oversaw the implementation of the violence interruption model for the city of Cleveland. And you know, in that delicate position, I couldn't even have a bad day. I couldn't come into the office and kick the trash can because I'm just feeling so frustrated by all the carnage and the hurt and the trauma in my community. Because if I did that, you know, one of them souls down in City Hall, you know, timid or whatever, like, oh my God, he made me nervous, and it's going to be filtered different because of my felony, right? Yeah,
you had to wake up every day knowing that you were a representative. Like, I represent, you know, so I have to put my best foot forward.
And as we always say, you can't pee in public.
You know,
because that they catch you, that's going to be interpreted differently. You know, and these are lessons that I've had to learn, you know, firsthand, you know, the hard way. I currently work for an organization right now called Stop the Pain, which is led by Charles C., which is dedicated to service. We're working with men and women from that's part of the Adult Parole Authority that's coming home from prison. You know, like literally. I know this might not be masculine enough for men, but like literally holding their hand through their transitional process. You know, as one who's been through it and help mentor them, identify resources and things like that.
And a lot of people, even if they are afraid to, you know, like maybe it doesn't look masculine to ask another person for help, but I mean, we're just human beings, and that's just the truth. That's what it is. You know, sometimes when you're taking this walk, you can't do it alone. You know, it's steps. You know, steps to this. And
degrees, definitely.
Different
degrees. And so,
well, you know what I would say for our viewers that are, you know, they're just wondering, where do I get started? You know, they're listening to you and they're seeing how you've overcome, you know, what was it, 18 years?
18 and a half.
18 and a half years in prison, and you came out and became an advocate, a guest speaker. You're on everybody's list, you know, from here to Atlanta. And they just may want to reach out to you for a little help. And we wanted to know, would you make yourself available if someone was to reach out to you? And if so...
Of course I would. My number, the number to reach me at is area code 216-937-5719. I would urge you, if this is your first contact with me, to first text me. Just say, hey, I'm such and such. I heard you speak on this podcast called Deeper Look. That way I could recognize that number and answer it or call back. So again, my number is area code 216-937-5719. I would only ask that if you call me and ask me for assistance, be ready. Be ready. Because some men in over my time in working reentry would get out, and I'd be like, so what you want to do? And they would say, I don't know. And I would look and say, well, how much time did you do? I did 20. You don't know? That's a strong disconnect. Yeah, that's a strong disconnect.
Yeah.
What did you do over the 20 years? There's just some things that if you were true to the path of evolution and just trying to evolve as a better human being, better person, then there's just a certain prerequisite amount of work that you would have did. And I'll be hard on you because I'm hard on myself, and because my mentors have been hard on me. And so, be ready.
All right, we like that. Sometimes that's what we need. That soft stuff don't get it done. So, we want to thank you for coming on the show today. There will be a part 2 because he has so much to offer. And I hope that you got his information. Once again, please say that phone number to reach you.
Area code 216-937-5719. And again, if you've got this number off this podcast, please text me first and mention that so I understand the context in which you're reaching out to me.
All right. Thank you, everyone. There'll be a part 2 to Collateral Sanctions. So thank you so much, and goodbye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.